Administrator roles. Hey everyone, Ben Finkel here, and in this nugget, we are going to talk about the various administrator roles that are available to you and your users inside of the Office 365 tenant. There's a whole bunch of them, and they all have different functionality that they can perform within the system. Some of it's overlapping, some of it's exclusive to one another, and all of it you can potentially be tested on. So we want to make sure that we really understand it. Hey, here's a newsflash for you. You're not going to be able to administer Office 365 all by yourself. It's just too big. Even if you have a kind of small organization, maybe 20, 25, 30 employees, you've got a ton of different responsibilities and roles in Office 365, whether it's setting up licenses or resetting passwords for users. There's a lot to get done, and consequently there are a lot of different administrator roles to be found inside of Office 365. Now, I covered these very briefly in an earlier nugget on provisioning tenants, but I want to go through them one by one here because, well, they're important, and also they're going to show up on the exam. You're going to get asked questions about them. Now, unfortunately, there is not an easy way to really go over all the different details of these roles. You simply kind of got to look at them and memorize them. Thankfully, the names are a little bit helpful. They're pretty descriptive regarding what each role can and cannot do. And furthermore, I'm going to try to break them down here into 1, 2, and actually a third tier of roles. So up at the top here, I've got what I'm considering Tier 1 roles, and underneath my Tier 2 roles, and I'll explain why I call them that in a moment. The first Tier 1 role, the role that you're most likely familiar with, is the Global Administrator. This is the user that first creates the tenancy inside of Office 365, and you are likely logging in as the Global Administrator. The Global Administrator has full access to the entire system. They have everything that all of the rest of the roles have, so that should be fairly straightforward and obvious to you. They are global. The most important takeaway about the Global Administrators, they are the only role that can assign other admins. So if you have a new hire and you need to give them the password admin role, you've got to sign in as a global admin user in order to assign the password admin role to that new user. The next Tier 1 role, the Billing Administrator, is pretty self-explanatory, I think. Billing Administrators are specifically for the purposes of billing or managing your billing in your Office 365 tenant, and that means managing subscriptions, making purchases for new subscriptions or new licenses, and as you'll find that most of these roles can do, they're going to be able to manage service requests and monitor service health. So users who have this role are basically in charge of ensuring that you have all of the subscriptions and all the features and all the licenses that you need to do your day-to-day job. The Service Admin is a very simple and very basic administrator role that simply manages services requests and monitors service health, and I'll explain why you would want to use a Service Admin in just a moment. Now down to the Tier 2 roles down here, User Management Admin and Password Admin. User Management Admin is all about managing user accounts in the system. They can create new user accounts, update the data on those user accounts, they can reset the passwords for those user accounts, and of course they can manage service requests and monitor service health. But here's the big thing. Their ability to reset passwords and manage user accounts excludes global billing and service admins. It excludes the Tier 1 roles, meaning they're only managing user accounts, they're only resetting passwords for true users of the system, the basic day-to-day users who do not have an administrator role such as global billing or service admin. Password admin is a similar kind of role, but it's even simpler than that. They can't manage user accounts. They can simply reset passwords, and they can monitor requests and service health, and they have the same exclusions that the user management admin has as well. So the Tier 2 roles are really about managing the users exclusive of the Tier 1 roles, if that makes sense. Hopefully that helps you organize it in your mind a little bit. Now there is one more collection of administrator roles. I guess you could call them Tier 3. I didn't really know what to call them here. But these are kind of service-specific roles, the Exchange admin, the SharePoint admin, and the Skype for Business admin. And like their name implies, they are administrators for those particular services inside of Office 365. And they can manage and maintain and monitor those services as administrators for just those particular products. Here's the thing, it's kind of recommended, and you probably want to make these admins also be a service admin in the general Office 365 tenant so that they can manage and monitor service requests and manage and monitor service health as part of their administrator role. So an Exchange admin can also create service tickets or requests relating to the Exchange system, if that makes sense. So the service admin is really meant to be used in conjunction with one of these other product-specific administrator roles. Now in a moment we'll bring up portal.office.com and I'll show you how to add and remove users from these roles. It's very easy to do inside of the admin interface. But of course this is Microsoft and this is Office 365 and we need to know about the PowerShell way of performing these administrative tasks as well. So I want to talk you through some of the PowerShell commands that you can use here, and these are all based on the old MS Online service PowerShell commandlets. If you watched the nugget on getting PowerShell set up on your system, you recall that you had to download and install the Azure AD tools onto your local desktop. Those are the MSOL commandlets. And the first one that we want to take a look at is the add and remove MSOL role member, which just like it sounds like is how you add and remove members from a role. You pass in a role name as a string, and you pass in an email address as well, and that adds that particular user, that identity, into that role. Now the role name can also be an object ID. You can get the GUID for a particular role using the other two commands that we want to talk about, which are get MSOL role and get MSOL role member. When you run this commandlet all by itself, it's going to list all the administrator roles inside of your tenant, and it's going to list that crazy long object ID known as the GUID. And if you want to, you can use the GUID in the add and remove commandlets instead of the name. I recommend the name. It's just easier and it's going to make things a little bit simpler for you. One important thing to note here, the role member email address can only be one single email address. You cannot add a list of email addresses, comma separated or otherwise, in this parameter. So you're executing this command one user at a time when you want to add and remove members from a role. The last command down here, get MSOL role member, just lists the members of a given role, and you can either specify -all or -max results with an integer value for the maximum number of results you want to return. So those are exclusive parameter sets for that particular commandlet. And you have to pass in the role GUID. So I just talked about how you can get that role GUID with get-MSOL role. Well, you got to use the GUID down here in this particular commandlet. Why? I don't know. That's just the way Microsoft programmed it. So we'll take a look at how we can perform these operations inside of the portal. If you launch portal.office.com, sign in as your global administrator user, because as we just learned, the only users who can do this have to be a member of the global admin role already. And I'm going to bring up the admin center here and of course just go to my users panel. Pull down on the left hand side here and select active users. I've only got a couple of users, but if I select one, let's select my Ben Finkel user here. I have a roles section right down here on their details, and I can click edit. And you can see right now it's set up as a basic user. So this is the type of user that the password and user management administrators can modify. I can also flag Ben Finkel as a global administrator if I want, or I can choose the third option here, customized administrator. And here it lists all of those different administrator roles that we just talked about. So if I wanted to make this user the password administrator, I would check the box here and notice that they are checkboxes. I could check multiple of them if I want. And down at the bottom here, you'll see that it's requiring me to enter an alternative email address. That's got to be an address that is not in Office 365. And why is that? Well, the reason for that is because, of course, since the password administrators cannot reset the password, I need an email address that they can contact me at in order to self-reset this password if I need to. So once you make someone a member of one of these administrator roles, they need an alternative email address that is outside of the Office 365 system. Click Save, and it will add me to that role, and that's it. I'm all done. Now we can take a look at the PowerShell commands as well. Here inside of my Windows PowerShell window, I am going to connect to the MSOL service. I'm going to run the connect-MSOL service commandlet. Again, if you recall our nugget on PowerShell, every time you open a new PowerShell context, you need to rerun this command in order to connect to the Office 365 tenant. And once I've done that, I can run any of those commands that I want. For instance, if I call get MSOL role with no parameters at all, here are all the different roles that are actually in my Azure AD directory. Now I know what you're thinking, this is a lot more than we just saw or we just talked about, and that's because Office 365 is backed up by Azure. Azure has a whole lot more roles besides just the ones that we talked about. But you can see some of the different roles in here that we did speak of. I see there's billing administrator up there. Service support administrator is the name of the service admin role. The password administrator is actually named help desk administrator here, so I'm going to copy this object ID onto my clipboard and come down here and call get MSOL role member dash role object ID. Paste in that that GUID, and look at that. There's my Ben Finkel at cptoffice.com as a role member of this particular role. If I wanted to add this user to the billing administrator role, all I would need is the name of the billing administrator, which is, well, billing administrator, and my email address. I come down here, Key in the PowerShell command, add-msol role member. The role name is billing administrator in quotes, and the email address is benfinkel@cbtoffice.com. Execute that command, and that's done. And now if we grab the GUID for that particular role, select this here and highlight it, call get MSOL role member. I can see, yep, Ben Finkel is a member of that role as well. And in theory, if we open up the admin portal here, and I'm just going to refresh this really quick. Yeah, now I'm a member of the password and billing administrator role reflected in the portal as well. Well, that concludes this nugget on administrator roles for Office 365. So just to recap, as a helpful hint, I tried to break the roles up into two tiers. Tier 1 being the global billing and service administrators, and Tier 2 being your user management administrators and your password administrators. The reason for the two tiers? Well, the user management and password, the Tier 2 administrators, cannot perform their functions against the Tier 1 roles. You can manage membership in these roles individually, one user at a time, either through the portal interface or with the PowerShell commandlets, the MSOL commandlets. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.